You're watching The Buck Stops Here, and time now for our special focus. On this day 25 years ago was the beginning of the enforced exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. More than 2 decades later, Kashmiri Pandits are still awaiting justice and a homecoming. They have organized themselves in a protest in the heart of the capital to tell the country, do not forget us. Let's go across now to somebody who's a Kashmiri Pandit himself and has always been an outspoken voice on this entire issue of the absence of justice and media attention for Kashmiri Pandits, Anupam Kher. Anupam, thanks for talking to us. I heard your speech when you were addressing your brethren, your community, and one of the things that struck out for me was the fact that you said that it is important to keep trying to make people uncomfortable. What did you mean by this? And explain to our viewers, why is this day, to the viewers who may not know, why is this day so important?
This day is important because on the 19th January 1990, Kashmiri Pandits were first time terrified by all of them coming onto the streets and sort of telling them to leave the city or leave the state. And after that, a massacre, a genocide started happening, and the result of it is 4 lakh Kashmiris are refugees in their own country. 25 years Barkha is enough period to feel bitter, to feel hurt, to feel disillusioned, to feel angry. It's not only the government that who have not done anything in the last 25 years concretely about it. It's also the media, it's also the people, it's also the so-called pseudo-seculars, intellectuals who have completely forgotten about a huge genocide and who throwing out of a community out of their own state. And why I say that make people uncomfortable is sometimes we are by nature, I think, a very peace-loving nature. We think that by writing an article or by writing a book or by writing a poem or by making these seminars, somebody will hear our plea. But I don't think that's happened. Nothing has happened so far. And so it's important to keep the wound at least alive. When the wound is alive and then starts healing, people stop seeing the wound. So I always feel like scratching it so that tell them, see our wound, we are still bleeding.
I do understand.
Only then you can sort of make people understand that what they have gone through. It's not only the uprooting of property, it's not uprooting of living in near Jhelum or near Dal Lake or Nishad Bagh or Handwara or Sopore. It's also an emotional uprooting of human beings, of people who are used to living in a certain atmosphere, a certain peaceful atmosphere.
Yes.
When they have to live in Jammu in the refugee camps, they have to live in Delhi or in Pune or at Bandra East, Mumbai. Acceptance of a situation does not mean that the wound is not there. And I just feel very sad that apart from so many government institutions, but people also sort of pay. This time I've noticed that you have interviewing and some other people are doing that. But overall, in the 25 years, people have kept quiet about it.
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying, Anupam, but you remember this time during the election campaign, you and I met in Srinagar, and you spoke at that time about how you had a hope that this time you had a hope that something would change for Kashmiri Pandits. Now, elections are over. We don't even have a government yet, unfortunately. Do you believe anything has changed for Pandits with this election? You see,
a certain optimist is always in me. That's how I dealt with my life, that optimism is the best way to achieve things. I feel that elections would have got some results, but unfortunately now we have president's rule over there. But I think things need to be done outside Kashmir first. This whole resettlement of Kashmiris, I think going back to Kashmir is only one of the issues. I think there should be an SIT to sort of sit down and sort of say what happened. What happened today? Mr. Digvijay Singh ridiculously tweets about that Jagmohan was the person who threw Kashmiri Pandits. How anti-national you can be by making a statement like that. It's very sad that something like that, it's an anti-national statement, I would like to say it is. So it is who are all those people who were killed during those time, that whether their body were cut with a kind of a saw, or whether their breasts were hung on the the tree. I'm sorry to be giving you graphic details, but that is what exactly I mean by making people uncomfortable. When the bodies are thrown out of on the streets, when their parts are cut, I think it's that SIT has to sit, find out and punish. I think people who are still like Bitta Karat is the person who is still around there, even though he has accepted in his interview. In an interview, I saw that he killed so many people. He killed those 4 BSF Jawans.
Yes, you're right. So, I understand what you're saying. That it's about justice. It's not just about a return. It's about justice for what happened. I do take that point. But respond to what people say. A number of politicians today say in Jammu and Kashmir. A number of Kashmiri Muslims say the security situation is improved. Why do not pundits try and go back and see for themselves what it's like now, with the violence having come down?
I did say that to you last time when I met you in Kashmir, that there is an atmosphere of slight hope in Kashmir. People seem to be a little more open and little more enthusiastic. But going back to Kashmir and sort of just because situation is convenient doesn't mean anything. You cannot sort of say that okay, now you come and nobody will is going to kill you. Sometimes the threat is very silent. The threat is in a look. The threat is in an atmosphere. It's not possible. I don't think people have to go back to be sort of killed again. What stops them from killing those people? And why should they be given a piece of land? I think that's why I feel that the best solution to this is to abolish the Article 370, not for any other reason. Special status has not given even Kashmiri Muslims anything. I'm sure the politicians have benefited out of the kind of money they have made. The corruption is at its peak. But unless every Indian has the power to buy a land there, unless it becomes a multicultural kind of a place, just sending Kashmiri Pandits over there is not going to solve the problem. And I will tell them not to go, just because it's a symbolic thing to say. I can also say that it's an election campaign line to say that we will give you a place to go. How is it going to happen? What is there any? Okay, let's sort of say that is there an area which has been demarcated, people who live together? First of all, it will appear like a ghetto.
But would you want that ghetto? Anupam,
there's so many things. The fact that they have to start now so that after 5 years things can be implemented.
Yeah, but this point about the ghetto,
it's not going to happen overnight.
Sure, but when you say this thing of a separate enclave, the number of Pandit groups have asked for separate enclaves, and that would be a kind of ghettoization. And Kashmiri Muslims are saying, come and live with us as we used to. That's
because out of fear. No. That's how can people say live with us? I'm not referring to only Kashmiri Muslims, but terrorist people who came over and gave boost to this whole exodus. How can they live over there? We were living there as 5% people of the total population, and when on the 19th of January there were millions and millions of Muslim people banging there and with the mashals and everything and says, leave your women back and just go from here. When there were murders happening, when in my own family there was a head of a Kashmiri Pandit kept in front of a veranda, it's not possible. These are only conversations which you can have. These are rhetorics.
But you know, there are also stories of amity. In Haba Kadal, I met a Muslim photographer who for 20 years has been looking after the house of his Pandit neighbor. So Anupam, I mean, you must have seen this yourself. There are also tales of deep closeness between Muslims and Pandits.
There are always human stories in such situations. I'm not denying that. I remember my childhood. I used to in 84 Karanagar. I used to live most of my time in Mr. Qazi's house, who is just a next door neighbor. These human stories are good for optimism in terms of, yes, there are people. I'm sure there are people who were really fond of Kashmiri Pandits. I still get calls from some people who sort of say that, why don't you come back? And this is time when I meant recently in elections, I felt that.
Yes.
But these human stories do not translate into concrete steps.
Okay. Last question to you. Are you concerned as a Kashmiri Pandit that there are a number of young people who are not familiar with their culture, that the Kashmiri language may even be diminished?
Absolutely. I personally feel that Kashmiri as a language, Kashmiriyat as a culture will go away. My mother, when she came to know that I was going to this function yesterday, she said, "Mera bada dil karta hai." She's 84 years old. "Mera bada dil karta hai कि तू कश्मीर में कोई मकान ले ले. Now, I would like to take my mother back. She has lived all her life in those small little lanes, in that shikaras, etc., etc. My own father, who could never go back after he came from Kashmir to this place. I want to go there. Sometimes the association of smell, sometimes the association of leaves, sometimes the association of a certain deja vu lighting through a tree. These things you do not get anything anywhere else. So, and the language will completely go, because people do not speak Kashmiri to their own children. And in 25 years time, which is a long time I am giving, I think it should happen in 15 years. If Kashmiri people do not talk to their children or teach them, that's what I told them yesterday. I said, just because you are wanting and sort of saying that hame apni watan wapas bhej do, but what are you doing for this culture? Are you teaching your children how to speak Kashmiri? They are not. So, and because there is not a written language, Sharda Lipi is not written and nobody actually knows, so it's going to be difficult.
Well, it really is a forgotten tragedy in so many different ways. Thank you, Anupam Kher, for speaking so movingly about your experiences and memories.
Thank you, Barkat. Thank you for talking to me.
One of the most moving and stirring first-person accounts by a Kashmiri Pandit appeared in The Hindu this morning, written by Smriti Kak Ramachandran. The passages literally leap out at you. In one, she writes, "In my story, a gun-wielding monster was not at my doorstep. It was the fear of him appearing that scared me more. I did not watch my house burn. I saw what was left of it in the pages of a magazine. My story is not about the loss of material goods. It's about the pain of carrying memories." Smriti Kak Ramachandran is with us now. Smriti, the sense one gets from reading this very deeply personal piece is that it took you a really long time to be able to confront the weight of the memories that you were carrying inside.
Yes, it did, because the story is almost like grief. It's very personal, and I wasn't very comfortable talking about my story at all.
Why? It was difficult, it was painful, you didn't want to go there?
It's difficult, it's painful, and you see, the Kashmir narrative is very fractured. So
very polarized.
Very polarized. The minute you you begin talking, there's always your version versus my version. There's always us versus them. I never wanted to get dragged into that. You know, it's very painful, because for a long time the Kashmir story was about the death numbers. It was about armed attacks. It was about army convoys, and it was about militants. And everybody forgot that. You know, in that entire thing, everybody forgot there's a human face to this tragedy. Nobody spoke of the people. Nobody spoke about all those civilians who were getting killed. They were civilians for the newspaper headlines, but they were brothers and fathers and sisters.
So they were treated as statistics instead of real people.
So the Kashmir story has been very told very unfortunately. I mean, there's always been it was mostly seen as an armed conflict. Then we moved to a very political sort of discourse of it. It's taken us 25 years to admit that there's another side to the story, and there are many more sides to the story which haven't been told yet.
You speak of your grandfather, who also eventually moves out, like almost everybody else did, among the Kashmiri Pandits, and how he felt this deep sense of betrayal, because he thought that his friends, his Kashmiri Muslim friends, were going to be there standing guard for him.
Exactly.
Now, you know, there are some stories like that. I've met a Kashmiri Muslim photographer who's actually, and I was just telling Anupam Kher that also, who's looked after his Pandit friend's house for years.
And thank God for those stories. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's just people. You know, when the government now talks of an honorable return and it talks of rehabilitation, how do you do that? Money, you know, 500 crore to 5,000 crore, that is not going to help us go back home.
Yeah.
Money can only help me build a brick and mortar structure. Unless and until that friend, that neighbor comes and says, you know what, you're safe in your house, come back and live here, I can't do that.
Have you been back at all?
I have never been back except for one day, which was like a work trip, and I did not venture out at all. I mean, I went, I did my job, and I was back. I refused to sort of... my husband has never been to Kashmir, and I always tell him that I'm sorry, when you'll go there when I go back home. I'm not taking you on a touristy, let's visit Kashmir, I'll show you Pahalgam, and this is the Dal Lake. I would never do that.
Why haven't you gone
Because
back?
It's very hard. I left in such... It was terrible. I mean, I didn't leave. It was not an honorable way to go. It wasn't migration because...
but when you left, and as you write, you thought you would go back. You told your neighbors you would come back.
Absolutely.
Right?
Forget the neighbors. We knew we are coming back every week. I mean, we used to just keep shifting the goalpost that, oh, next month, next week, we are going to be back home. okay, at best 6 months. Nobody expected it to be this long.
And you talk about waiting for that elusive normalcy, this word
Absolutely.
that has come to be such a cliche in the Kashmir discourse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True. Normalcy was going back home. Normalcy was, the government would announce, yes, the militants have all been flushed out. There is no more tension. There's no more armed conflict. So everybody who has left comes back home. That was normalcy. Normalcy was our friends and neighbors saying, yes, something terrible happened. It was all very tragic. Now we pick up the threads and we move forward.
Why is the reduction in militancy, which has been there statistically speaking, though you see flare-ups every now and then, why has that not been an incentive for pundits to return? Is it because it's the social fabric that is more fragile than the actual threat of militancy?
It is because, like I said, I mean, I don't feel protected. A gunman standing outside my house can offer me protection only so much. I'll be more comfortable and more protected when my neighbor says I'm fine. It's as simple as that.
Your grandfather's ashes, you write, he wanted them to be immersed in the valley, and that could not happen.
That could not happen.
You didn't think at that time that this was my grandfather, this was so dear to him. What is this wall? It's also an emotional wall that's come up, right? It's not just the wall of militancy or violence.
When he passed away, it was 1996, and I don't think the conditions were conducive for us to return. One, two. It was like, if we return, where do we go? Because we don't have a house there anymore. So it would have been like checking into a hotel or something to go and immerse ashes. That's not how you do it. You don't go back home and, when you think of Kashmir, you think of home. You do not think of hotels, you do not think of living with somebody else.
So when you think of Kashmir today, what do you see in your head?
Right
when you
now,
think of your home,
yeah,
what is home?
I'm holding on to an image of a home which is now being razed. So that is another story there. But
and let me read out the last paragraph of your piece to you. I find similarities with the story of the homeless from Afghanistan to Congo. I know the pain of the Myanmarese refugees who tell me how his life fits into 2 boxes. I search their stories for signs of betrayal. I ask them how they deal with it, because my story of betrayal is a festering wound and I do not know how to make peace with it. What do you mean by your life fitting into 2 boxes?
I've extensively sort of covered refugees, and I remember meeting this one refugee here. He lives in Delhi now, and he showed me 2 boxes, and he says, I'm 25 years old, but my life fits in these 2 boxes. That's all I have. And both of us were crying, because I said, I know where this comes from, and I know how you feel, because when I came, I had a box with me too. I mean, that's all we had. And funny, I mean, when we left, we couldn't carry anything from our house, but strangely enough, I have a small quarter plate, which was, like a baby thing, which I had as a child. I don't know how it's with me, and it's the only thing with me.
Symbol of home.
It's the only thing I have still.
And in the end, do you think you'll ever go back? You hope?
I hope so. I hope so. I don't think I want to die like my grandfather outside our house, but we always sort of keep hoping. I mean, we don't give up hope. So
it's been 25 years, and I hope something changes. Thank you so much for this soul-stirring piece.
It's been a very agonizing 25 years, and I firmly believe that nobody has gained anything from this conflict. And it's taken us 25 years to reach here. Let's not waste 25 years thinking how we go back. We should just, I don't know, we shouldn't, instead of trading blame and sort of, we have to move forward. I mean, if we want to ever.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a very powerful warning to those that this cannot be a forgotten tragedy anymore. That's it on The Buck Stops Here. We'll see you tomorrow night at 9 p.m.